New term. We're in Genesis, the back end of Genesis.
New term, new you.
Yeah, but see how long that lasts for.
Indeed.
My habit is always to fail. This Sunday sort of kicked off Genesis 26. Pretty open slather. How are we coming into chapter 26 in this part of the book of Genesis?
Yeah, so it's been a while since we've been back in this particular point in Scripture. And so, I mean, it was helpful the last couple of weeks spending a bit of time in kind of the creation narrative, 1 to 11, reminding ourselves about Abraham, the promise, God's goodness and faithfulness in spite of human sinfulness. And so as we land in 26, following the death of Abraham, we're really asking the question, is God's promise actually intergenerational, or will the kids of the promise stuff it up? I think that's the big question that this next section kind of pushes into. New section, new main character, same old set of problems that always seem to pop up time and time again.
I guess the link with Abraham is something that jumps up pretty quickly because of God straight up reaffirming the promise from verse 2. So I guess that question gets answered fairly quickly in this section. And Isaac is the child of promise and the recipient of those promises to Abraham, but then also the repeat story, Isaac pretending Rebecca his sister, like Abraham did twice.
Yeah, and sorry, it's the same guy. So it's like King Abimelech in Gerar. Like literally, Dad did the same thing in chapter 20. He's now in 26. And it's exactly the same narrative. And so you're like, next generation's past, there's a whole new set of circumstances. God's faithfulness has passed to the next generation, but yet they're still trying to score the same own goals that Abraham was back in Gerar, which is really interesting because I think it's that fear-driving behaviour that is pretty relatable, right? We kind of big picture, we can trust God in the macro, understanding that big picture God is sovereign over everything. But then in that micro of the conflict with the king, you go, well, actually, I'm pretty attached to my head. I don't want to lose it, and so I might just lie to the king, tell the white lie of it's my sister. But yeah, I find it really interesting how same character, same location. Same king, different character, same outcome. But the curious thing for me that keeps popping up is King Abimelech is painted exclusively positively in Genesis, both chapters 20 and 26. God affirms his righteousness and also says, I have protected your rights or kept you from sinning in chapter 20. And so you've got a Gentile king who's communing with God in a vocal voice, like he's hearing
God
from
speaks
God.
to him. Yeah.
God is speaking clearly to him,
Yeah.
and affirming some level of righteousness, and offering some level of protection. And so I'm pretty convinced that King Abimelech is one of the first expressions of the blessing to the nations, and so as Abraham's covenant of protection protects people like Ishmael through his wells early on in the story, even though he's a child of the lack of trust in the promise. You've got King Abimelech, who is protected under Abrahamic covenant of I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, which is kind of beautiful.
And even with Isaac making his way through the land, unearthing the old wells Abraham had dug, and then moving on. And you might have said this, but just the very fact of he's leaving behind blessing as he goes, sort of thing. In this time of famine, the blessing is spreading, and
and he's literally leaving springs of living water in the wilderness and the desert, right? So he is leaving behind a pathway of life through this barren wasteland, deserty, wildernessy like space. And yeah, look, we touched a little bit on it. Not super prevalent in 26, but massive in Genesis. The worlds themselves are symbols of life, of togetherness, of unity, and they pop up left, right, and centre. Do you have any thoughts on wells or things that are popping up? Big question.
I enjoyed, I think, this. I guess this hint of New Eden that kind of bubbles out of this moment of famine and like sort of barren, empty, dry land. There's no provision, but through Isaac, you sort of get the double mention of both. He's successful with his crops, like there's fruitfulness and multiplication, and how much Genesis repeats this line: "Go and be fruitful and multiply." So to have this sort of barren land now kind of sprouting plants and bushes and trees, and it's a garden, and then to have this dry land now bubbling up with water.
Yeah.
The Eden image was in my mind. I think the other bit of the puzzle that I came to a little bit late that I'm still sort of sitting with is, okay, we're getting this like, Eden-like fertile land, but then that the end of the story sees Isaac go up to Beersheba in verse 23, where he goes up to Beersheba, so some kind of mountain-ish place where the Lord meets with him.
Yeah.
And then a man does a kind of priestly thing on the mountain.
Yeah.
He builds an altar and then does the tent. So that image...
And digs another well. Yeah.
That image to me puts a few pieces together that kind of... This sounds like a new Eden moment.
And to push that further, you've then got what happens in the garden when there's fruitful multiplication. Then there's jealousy, see, take, sin. There's actually that, and then a going out and away. So there's a
there's this deception.
There's deception, but it's almost like you can't trust humans with good things. It's like we'll just break them. Eve has everything she could ever have and reaches, sees something, is jealous of what that could provide, reaches and takes. The Philistines here see this good gift, which, he became rich on account of his crops. Where did the crops go? It's the Philistines, right? I don't think there's a massive raging export trade. It's like, you want food? I got food. You give me money, we swap. And so they're jealous of this crop that they've consumed themselves. Right, they have been the recipient of blessing. Sure, they've had to part with a bit of coin, but that jealousy actually drives them to decreate the wells. So they're actually making dry dirt where there was living water, and that's essentially an own goal. It's another own goal because they're pursuing their own demise through spite. And similarly, like what are future crops going to rely on? They're going to rely on the water here, and if you drive away the best crop grower in the region, it's such a short-sighted goal. Which is that's another Edenic reference in terms of the short-sightedness. I want the fruit. I'll take the fruit. I'll eat the fruit. Oh no way! I'm stuck. I'm outside now. I've got to toil hard to do that. And so, then hardness of toiling to actually get the wells redug. The hardness of toil to actually grow your own crops. There's a whole bunch of fun stuff going on
Hitting
there
up
as well.
against curse. One other connection, this is actually, David Weinberg mentioned this on Sunday, but in verse 10, when Abimelech says, "What is this you have done to us?" That's what God says when he finds Adam and Eve in their deception. He says, "What is this you have done?" In Genesis 3:13, I wrote it down. There's a double reference. 3:13, God comes to Adam and Eve and says,
starts with where are you, and then ends up with what is this you have done?
Yeah, 3:13.
Yeah.
The Lord God said to the woman, "What is this you have done? The serpent deceived me, and I ate."
Yeah.
Is that little moment, but it gets repeated with Cain and Abel in chapter 4, verse 10. Am I my brother's keeper? Says Cain. The Lord said, "What have you done?" Your brother's blood cries out from the ground. I don't know what to make of those little moments, but Abimelech, the righteous one, is positioned similarly to how God approached the sinful offspring.
Yeah. He is occupying that the ruler of the garden in some respects. So there's an interesting thing to play there. What is this you have done? Yeah. Anyway, let's we can play with that. Yeah, we'll play with that. See what happens. And
Yeah.
We'll report back whatever we find. But yeah, I do find it really interesting. Sorry, it comes back to Abimelech's righteousness. Where does that come from? And why is it that we've actually got the story of the deceptive Israelites contrast with the righteous Philistine
Yeah.
and the righteous dweller of the land that is not an inheritor? It's the alien, it's the foreigner among you who's actually is cultivating the conditions for blessing at one level. And sorry, there's a justice behind the way that he's running his kingdom, or whatever you want to call it, the Philistine nation, in that from their perspective, Isaac the foreigner who's dwelling amongst them grows something massive, and it's not like there's not a super tax on the rich and wealthy, and then it becomes Philistine property. There's actually a good trade for that, which boosts Isaac's wealth, and even in the fact that when he gets cast out from this fertile soil, he doesn't get pillaged and all his stuff taken.
Yeah.
He's actually sent away with his wealth. So sorry, the thing that I keep scratching my head on is justice, righteousness, fairness. Where do we find that in Genesis? Not in God's
people of Israel. Yeah,
It's not in the people. Yeah, it's not in the Israelites.
offspring.
It's not in the children of the promise. It's actually elsewhere.
Yeah.
And even, I guess we can go there. Pharaoh, similarly, as we get there later on with Joseph, he has a sort of journey in Egypt for this particular thing. But on the whole, Pharaoh treats him with respect and does facilitate the rising up through the ranks. He does facilitate the trust of this outsider. To go on a whim because he's followed a bunch of visions and all those kind of things. But there is a really interesting presentation of the Gentile in Genesis. And they're not painted as the enemy at this particular point in time. And they're not even negatively portrayed. It's almost as though they're deliberately set as a contrast to who should be righteous. And you can't ask the question is, where is the imputed righteousness in God's people at this particular time? Abraham, credited him as righteousness, so he is righteous from about, Genesis 15-ish. Genesis 12, Genesis 15, it's all the same. But he has a declaration and status of righteousness at that particular point in time, even though he then goes, wife's my sister in 20, and there's still some questionable behaviour. That his declaration and status is, that's the mechanism. To the point where God then says in 26, he did everything I commanded. He did he followed my statutes and my laws, and you go, you almost scratch and go, he didn't, did he? What did he do? The one thing he did was he believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. So that's the thing where I kind of go, how on earth does he fulfill all of God's statutes and regulations and rules and all that? The answer has to be faith, or it's inconsistent. So anyway.
Feels like it sets up that at this point in the story, what could possibly threaten God's promise? It's not the evil nations out there. It's not the oppressive ruler messing with the system. It's the human heart and tendency to sin in repeated generational ways. And I think what I find interesting about Isaac, and maybe part of why that repetition comes out a couple of times in a row, is it feels like the story of Genesis puts before God's people that question of faith, and that test of faith that Abraham has to go through. And it's sort of like the choice is that kind of faith that doesn't grasp or take or make plans or determinations in your own strength, or the desire to actually reach for blessing for yourself. And there's something about what Isaac does, like having just heard God's promise, like that's sort of like, that's the loud noise in the speaker. Like God makes this promise, and then straight away the fear in his heart moves him to make this plan or machination to go, my wife is actually my sister. And it feels like that move and that impulse gets repeated through the Genesis story, especially with children. Like a mum and dad having children becomes another means and mechanism to secure blessing in a time of threat or a world of threat. But maybe in this spot, Isaac's inability to actually reckon with his own fear and his heart is sort of that obstacle to the kind of faith and trust that Abraham had in those couple of moments, though his failures were being repeated here too. So, yeah.
The other thing along that line that kind of I wonder, I'm not really settled on it. I'm fairly convinced of the Mosaic authorship of Genesis, which puts it probably in a post-Exodus or like during or post-Exodus timeline. Is the what is God telling that first audience in Genesis? Not only is he revealing how he created, and not only is he revealing the story of Israel, but what are some of those Exodus threads? There's Exodus threads everywhere in Genesis. I don't think that's accidental. I actually think that's almost a corrective to what's going on in Israel as they're hearing the creation narrative and the story as authored by Moses through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit that's gifted to him. What are the things in that kind of Exodus timeline that are being talked about? And so things like the wells of life. You go, oh man, as I wander the wilderness, we do want a well. We do want the living water. We do understand about the importance of famine and food. All we've had is bread for 40 years. Like, this is actually something really quite significant. And so, there's kind of that other pocket of thought that just sits there. You go, right, what's this communicating with the first audience? And then how does that then communicate with us again? We're a few generations after the Exodus. We're a few thousand years later. But there's a few interesting things that kind of, as we move into this Isaac narrative, and particularly with the promise lens, where you go, is the promise still valid as we move from father to son? Is the same question that goes, are the promises to Abraham still valid as we sit here, either in the wilderness or in the promised land, remembering the Exodus and all the things that have happened before that? Is God still faithful? Is his promises still legit? Are we still actually anticipating the stars in the sky and the sands of the shore in terms of descendants and blessing to the nations and ends of the earth, and like all these kind of paradigms that have been set up in the early parts of Genesis that are going to flow all the way through Matthew 28 to the new creation in Genesis 22. Not Genesis, the other one, Revelation 22. As we make that movement, there's I guess there's just a bunch of fun stuff in Genesis here that's not just some isolated story about some dead guy. It's actually this beautiful, interwoven bunch of threads that God's tugging on to actually pull his people in his direction.
And this picture, God's... Was this your big idea? God's purpose prevails? Was that this one? Or something prevails? God's promise prevails?
Faithfulness, promise.
Something like that.
I don't know. It was like 24 hours ago.
Something like that was your big idea, but like...
I don't know.
Anyway, that's the vibe of chapter 26.
Yeah.
Like Isaac's not the perfect one, but
Yeah,
God's
faithfulness. God's faithfulness prevails in spite of, even when people grasp at the promise and try and take that away in the Philistines, both the jealousy on the crops and all the other stuff. But yeah, it's interesting. Didn't play much with it, but so Beersheba literally well of the oath or well of the seven. There's stacks of stuff there, but it's interesting. The seven things interesting because you kind of count the wells of Abraham. There's a bunch of them. There's that uphill thing you mentioned in terms of that priestly mountain communion with God thing going on.
Yeah.
There's the tent, which kind of is foreshadowing tabernacle communion with God.
There's this rest image, or like
Yeah.
Beersheba as like well of seven, up the mountain, building an altar, worshipping. It sort of has this vibe of rest. Like we've hit days 1 to 6, and now this is 7, and the work is complete. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. What did you think? Yeah, wells of 7. Was there something with the 7 that you were playing with?
So there's something interesting about, so there's communion with God in terms of there's the altar where there's presumably sacrifices, maybe a burnt offering, maybe Isaac's like, haha, where's my kids? I'll sacrifice some of them. No. There's the spring of life, water and water, wind, spirit, breath are all kind of in that semantic range. So I'll almost see like a bit of a Trinitarian picture in terms of what's going on there, in terms of communion of God, spirit, living water, drag a bit of Jesus in there, never hurts. But there's just something interesting where Isaac journeys through the Philistine regions. There's peace on every side, which kind of there's a David echo there, 277. There's going up the mountain. There's fellowship, rest, communion with God. There's dwelling, and there's God's people in Isaac blessing the nations. There's just a bit of everything kind of at play at that particular point.
It's like this kind of recipe where, like, you know, you're like, I'm going to make this lovely Indian curry. It's like, what spices should we use? All of them. And it kind of feels like in Genesis, you just get little bits of everything pop up. I'm now sitting with the rest thing only because it's sort of in this passage we get the potential hostility that could have aggravated between the people of promise and the outsider nations, but there's this sort of covenant of peace. And so at least in the unfolding of the story, the Philistines are the enemies that are a threat to rest in the land. And in places like Joshua, rest isn't, let's put your head and have a nice little nap. It's no, the enemies have been subdued and the potential threat has been sorted and the chaos that's been unfolding has been ordered. And so rest is kind of that.
I think there's kind of also a parallel narrative of God's people and the Gentiles. And so what does Isaac need to do to stay part of the blessing? Nothing. Like he's born into it. He's locked in. It's got nothing to do with his behaviour, and that's why it's reminded. It's because of Abraham's obedience that you're in part of the promise. The Philistines are a little bit more tricky because what do they need to do? I'll bless those who bless you, I'll curse those who curse you. And as the tension grows, you're like, well, look out, Philistines. If you actually go from blessing to curse, you're actually putting yourself under threat from God because that won't end well for you, which I think King Abimelech actually comprehends that, which is why that kind of unnecessary peace treaty, like he's already gone, it doesn't actually make sense for Abimelech to come and talk to him again. And then he asked for a treaty of no harm, which is like the dumbest thing I've ever heard of, right?
Yeah.
He's already the recipient of blessing, but he's trying to make sure that he doesn't get hurt. I know you've looked after us, you've actually prevented us from all dying in the famine, all that kind of, but can you also not kick us in the guts as well? It almost goes without saying.
Yeah.
It's kind of, and I like that pushes me into the space where it's like, it's an unnecessary blessing. It's kind of like that overflowing grace and mercy kind of God's provision is abundant and overflowing. It's not always necessary. God doesn't go, what's the minimum basic thing you need to actually achieve maintenance of life? There's this abundant overflowing grace. And yeah, I think that's expressed in places like Isaac doesn't make the Philistines dig out their own wells. He actually does dig out them. And there's the naming convention where he renames them the same name as the old
Abraham
one.
did, yeah.
Which I think is another expression of, hey, it's actually Abraham who's blessing you. You are blessed through the Abrahamic covenant. It's not my actions that's blessing you. It's because of the obedience of my father Abraham.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of there's a sweetness to how the Abrahamic covenant plays out with the nations and with Isaac and the Philistines. So yeah, it's interesting.
Fun.
That'll do.